What happens when every single person in a room has a slightly different story about the exact same night, and one of them is lying? Welcome back for another English movie review lesson. I'm Teacher Teddy, and today, let's talk about Knives Out. The story begins by introducing Harlan Thrombey, a hugely successful crime novelist who is found dead the morning after his own 85th birthday party, in what looks, at first, like a simple suicide. A private detective named Benoit Blanc has been mysteriously and anonymously hired to investigate, and he starts interviewing every member of Harlan's large, wealthy family, one at a time, alongside the local police. Each family member gives their own account of that night, and Blanc listens carefully to every single version. His daughter said that she had built her own successful business entirely by herself, without any help from her father's money, a claim other relatives quietly dispute. Said that she had built is reported speech here. Notice the tense shifts backwards from the present, I built this myself, to the past perfect, she had built, because we're reporting what someone said earlier, rather than quoting them directly. His son-in-law told detectives he had been faithful in his marriage, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. Told detectives he had been faithful is reported speech again. Told needs a listener, as in told detectives, unlike said, which doesn't require one, a small but genuinely important difference between English's two most common reporting verbs. Central to the story is Marta Cabrera, Harlan's kind, hardworking nurse, who was the last person to see him alive on the night he died. Marta has an unusual physical condition. She is medically unable to tell a lie without immediately being sick, which becomes hugely important once Blanc realizes her reported version of events might be the only one in the entire house he can genuinely trust. Harlan's extended family fills the rest of the house that weekend, and almost every one of them turns out to have a financial motive for wanting him gone. His son Walt runs the family's publishing business, but privately resents never being trusted to run it his own way. His youngest daughter-in-law, Joni, depends heavily on Harlan's generosity to fund her lifestyle and her own daughter's education, even while insisting to everyone she's entirely self-sufficient. When Blanc later reports that Joni had insisted she needed nothing from Harlan, the line gets a knowing laugh from the family, since almost everyone in the house already suspects the opposite is true. Had insisted she needed nothing is reported speech once more. The past perfect signals that her insistence happened well before Blanc is now repeating it back to the room. Once the family gathers for the reading of Harlan's will, the true scale of everyone's financial dependence on him becomes impossible to hide. At the will reading, a lawyer reveals that Harlan left his entire fortune and the family publishing business to Marta, shocking and infuriating almost everyone in the room. The family instantly turns on her, accusing her of manipulating a lonely old man, even as Blanc quietly continues piecing together what actually happened that night from everyone's conflicting statements. As Blanc digs deeper, Ransom, Harlan's charming but resentful grandson, insists he wasn't even at the house on the night of the murder, a claim that quickly falls apart under further questioning. Insists he wasn't shifts to insisted he hasn't been, once Blanc reports it back to the rest of the family later in the film. The same information, reported a second time, with the tense correctly shifted to match. The family's various statements to the police keep contradicting each other in small but important ways. One relative claims that Harlan had seemed perfectly happy right up until the moment he died, while another admits that he had actually argued fiercely with nearly everyone at the party. Claims that Harlan had seemed, and admits that he had argued, both use the same backshifted pattern, even though the two reporting verbs, claims and admits, suggest very different levels of honesty. As Blanc keeps working through statement after statement, the true sequence of events from that night finally starts to come into focus, and it turns out to be far more complicated and far more sympathetic to some people in that house than anyone assumed at first. When Marta later explains to Blanc her side of that night, her account finally lines up with the physical evidence in the house, confirming Blanc's growing suspicion that nearly everyone else's reported version of events had been shaped, at least a little, by self-interest. Explains to Blanc her side of that night becomes, once Blanc repeats it to someone else, explained that she had told him everything. Another clear example of a spoken sentence shifting backwards once it's reported secondhand. The film's final twist centers on one family member whose earlier claim to be completely innocent doesn't hold up once Blanc lays every account side by side, and it reshapes everything the audience thought they understood about that night, right down to the exact wording of Harlan's will. Had told the family he was innocent is our last reported speech example. The past perfect here shows that the lie happened before the main events Blanc is now piecing together. One more layer of backshifting stacked on top of everything else. Once Blanc finally lays out the full truth in front of the entire family, he reports back almost everything each relative originally told him, one statement after another, showing precisely where each person's version of events quietly bent the truth in their own favor. Reports back almost everything each relative originally told him pulls every single grammar point from this episode together at once. Different reporting verbs, backshifted tenses, and listeners named or left out, all working together in one confident final summary. Now, let's talk about how this story is told, and the most obvious comparison here is Murder on the Orient Express, the 2017 adaptation of Agatha Christie's classic locked room mystery. Critics repeatedly described Knives Out as a modern update of that same Agatha Christie formula. A large cast of wealthy suspects, a brilliant outside detective, and a plot built almost entirely around whose account of events can actually be trusted. Where Murder on the Orient Express plays its mystery in a straightforward, classical style, Knives Out uses the exact same structure, but adds sharp modern satire about wealth, privilege, and immigration, giving a very old genre a distinctly current edge. That's really what critics kept coming back to. Both films trust the audience to actively listen to what each suspect says and reports about the others, rather than simply watching the plot unfold on its own, which makes reported speech, an unusually natural focus for a film built almost entirely around interviews and testimony. This episode also has 5 bonus vocabulary words to review, pulled from how critics have actually described this film. Our first word is labyrinthine. Labyrinthine describes something with a hugely complex, twisting structure, like a maze. Critics often praised the film's labyrinthine plotting, full of clues that only make sense on a second viewing. Our second word is deadpan. Deadpan describes humor delivered in a completely serious, expressionless way. Daniel Craig's detective is often praised for his deadpan delivery of the film's driest jokes. Our third word is eccentric. Eccentric describes someone whose behavior is unusual or strange in an entertaining way. Harlan's family is full of eccentric characters, each with their own strange habits and secrets. Our fourth word is scathing. Scathing describes criticism that is extremely harsh and sharply critical. Several reviewers called the film a scathing satire of wealthy families who quietly depend on money they claim to have earned entirely themselves. Our fifth and final word is duplicitous. Duplicitous describes someone who deliberately deceives others, often while appearing completely honest. Almost every member of Harlan's family turns out to be duplicitous in one way or another. Now, let's talk about how Knives Out has actually been received since its release. Critically, the response was overwhelmingly positive, with the film holding one of the highest scores of any major mystery release in recent memory, and critics broadly agreeing that it revitalized a genre many people had assumed was old-fashioned. Audiences responded just as strongly, helping the film earn well over $300 million worldwide, against a modest $40 million budget, a huge return that reportedly surprised even the studio behind it. Much of the online discussion has focused on how cleverly the screenplay is constructed, with many viewers saying they wanted to immediately rewatch the film once they knew the ending, just to see how carefully every reported statement had been planted with hidden clues along the way. The film's satire of wealthy, out-of-touch families has also generated plenty of discussion, with many critics and audiences reading it as a pointed commentary on inherited privilege and immigration in modern America, all wrapped inside a purely entertaining mystery. Online, discussion of the film today tends to focus on a few recurring topics: how it reinvented the classic whodunit format for a modern audience, whether Benoit Blanc ranks among cinema's great fictional detectives, and how well its satire holds up on repeated viewings. Let's go through reported speech from this episode. Use said when there's no listener mentioned in the sentence, as in, she said that she had built the business herself. Use told when you do mention a listener directly, as in, he told detectives he had been faithful. When we report what someone said, the tense usually shifts backwards. Is becomes was, and have done becomes had done, and so on. Reporting verbs like claimed, insisted, explained, and admitted can all replace said, and each one adds a slightly different shade of meaning about how confident or how honest the original speaker actually seemed. A useful pattern worth remembering: reporting verb, plus a listener if one's needed, plus that, plus the subject, plus the backshifted verb. He told the detective that he had left early. Try reporting something someone told you recently, using at least one of these reporting verbs correctly. Let's also go through our 5 bonus vocabulary words from this episode. Labyrinthine. Extremely complex and twisting, like a maze. The plot is genuinely labyrinthine. Deadpan. Humor delivered in a completely serious, expressionless way. His deadpan delivery makes the jokes land even harder. Eccentric. Unusual or strange in an entertaining way. Every member of this family is wonderfully eccentric. Scathing. Extremely harsh and sharply critical. It's a scathing satire of wealth and privilege. Duplicitous. Deliberately deceiving others while appearing honest. Nearly everyone in this house turns out to be duplicitous. Try using one of these 5 words yourself, either to describe this film or another mystery you know well. So, what's the final verdict on Knives Out? It's a wonderfully constructed modern mystery that rewards close attention, backed by a genuinely funny, sharply written script, and a cast that's clearly having fun with the material. It's easy to see why it revived mainstream interest in the whodunit genre almost overnight. If you enjoy a clever puzzle of a film, one where paying close attention to exactly what each character says actually pays off by the end, this is very much worth your time. Did you enjoy Knives Out? Let me know in the comments on the video, or get in touch. If this helped you improve your English today, subscribe on YouTube, or follow along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for more movies reviewed in slow, clear English. Interactive learning materials for this lesson can be found for free on engmoviereviews.com.